Will Smith's appearance was unexpected by everyone. With all eyes fixed on the prosecution's table, the atmosphere in the room was electric. When Will Smith strode in through the rear doors, everyone gasped, and the judge was no exception. Will alone had come out with no press release or prepared message. Up until that point, he had maintained his silence while rumors, court leaks, and whispered recordings involving Diddy circulated, with the latter being deemed too upsetting to be publicly released. However, a shift had occurred. Perhaps the evidence was piling up. Someone he trusted betrayed him, and that could have been the trigger. Perhaps it was due to the fact that the videos were played in private. Will had had enough of keeping quiet about it. Not in his famous role, but as a witness who had witnessed too much to say anything, he took the stand. The courtroom was unprepared for what Will revealed about Diddy, the parties, the manipulation, and the systematic control, because it was both explosive and a warning when he started speaking. Day one of the Diddy trial began similarly to all the others. As they awaited the next planned witness, the room was filled with low-volume chatter, with members of the press slumped into their assigned seats and attorneys whispering tactics. The courtroom took on a new vibe as Will Smith entered the building unaccompanied by his entourage legal team or announcement. You could hear a pin drop in the silence. Opinions varied on whether that was a gaffe, but everyone could see this was genuine by watching Will walk calm and methodical with a serious and intent expression on his face. At the defense table, Diddy had been conversing with his attorneys when the judge arched an eyebrow, causing him to halt mid-sentence and become pale. Will skipped the whole meeting and headed straight for the witness stand, avoiding everyone's gaze. Even Diddy. "This is not a subpoena for me to appear here today," Will started. "I wanted to speak." The court granted his request, and the whole trial changed course, since what Will was about to say wasn't included in any media story. This was not a Facebook or Twitter leak. Something that started at a private party attended by Hollywood's upper crust lingered with him for years. A lengthy silence had been his undoing, he admitted. "I've directed films that explore bravery. Certainly, I have discussed honesty. Acting like heroes has earned me accolades." He tilted his head slightly toward Diddy, but it didn't change his underlying conviction that he needed to be forthright about what he had seen, felt, and who had planned it all. "You acted." As with many Hollywood relationships, Will informed the courtroom that it all began with an invitation. It was facilitated by a mutual acquaintance who is well respected in the field. According to how they presented it, it was meant to be an exclusive event, Diddy's private party every year. Nothing out of the ordinary here. It was simply a gathering of influential people in the business world who wanted to network and share ideas. "I didn't question it since he had gotten similar offers previously," he claimed. However, Will could tell right away that something was wrong when he got there. It took place in a remote hilltop mansion. The curving driveway was lined with black SUVs. There were security guards stationed all around the place, not only at the gates. As soon as I entered, my phone was taken away. That should have been the first warning sign. They claimed it was for privacy to ensure everyone's safety and comfort, but it seemed more like they were trying to hide something. Will went on to detail the manner in which he was led about the estate. The music was soft and soothing, and the lights were low. Despite the lack of obvious cameras, the presence of mirrors set at peculiar angles created the impression that everything was under scrutiny. Will added that Diddy came up to him one-on-one after they had mingled for a while and had a few beers. He spoke a phrase along the lines of, "Now you'll see why our circle is so powerful." Accompanying that statement was a smile, unfriendly and calculated. According to Will, he thought he was meeting with industry heavyweights when he accompanied Diddy to a lower floor of the mansion. Rather, the sight he beheld sent shivers down his spine. Some of the folks in uncomfortable postures were obviously drunk beyond reason, and I recognized a few from famous movies and songs. Some of them seemed uneasy, as if they weren't really choosing to be there. Like a producer on set, Diddy directed the proceedings while others watched and recorded on little devices. As Will took a long breath, he halted. The point was for me to be confused and not know what to do. Remaining silent after seeing something like that makes you complicit. Will kept talking with a calm and collected tone. My private non-public address was the recipient of a parcel a week following the celebration. It contained a flash drive and a handwritten note that said, "Welcome to the family." According to Will's testimony, the level of terror he felt upon viewing the contents was unparalleled. The video was shot that very evening. It was painful enough that some of it showed me doing nothing more than being there, but there were other times when I seemed confused, when I couldn't quite put my finger on what had transpired or spoken. Editing made it appear as though I was taking part rather than just shockedly watching. It was then that he realized these were not parties, but rather blackmail factories. Every gathering gave someone more power to wield against anybody else who showed up. A few days down the road, Will recalled getting a call from Diddy. He started by inquiring about the status of his welcome present, and then quickly shifted the conversation to one about possible partnership. I was expected to play along as we were now bonded by shared secrets. The message was plain. Will related a discussion that had stayed with him ever since he testified. After visiting one of Diddy's gatherings, a promising young actor suddenly became tough to deal with. As Diddy casually stated, he remarked, "It's a shame when talent doesn't understand how the business really works." The actor's career had come to a standstill 2 months later with no new jobs, callbacks, or anything else happening. In the end, he quit the business altogether. He assessed the courtroom from every angle. It wasn't limited to boisterous gatherings. Everything was planned out. It was computed. Opportunities opened up for those who cooperated after being compromised. But those who fought back saw their careers ruined. Will looked across to the jurors and waited. My family, my work, and my reputation were the things I said I was trying to safeguard for a long time. However, I hid the fact that I was complicit in a system that caused harm to individuals. I came here today because I finally realized it. According to Will, he began receiving frequent invites to Diddy's parties following that first one. I turned them all down, but it seemed like every time I did something bad would happen. Funding for a project I was involved with would vanish. The director I was supposed to collaborate with would receive a better offer, or screenplays that had been offered to me would end up in the hands of someone else. He gave testimony about the trend he noticed. It appeared like terrible luck at first, like the inevitable fluctuations in every business. But it happened at the same exact moment every time, and I wasn't alone. Will recounted discussions he had with other performers who shared his experiences. In our coded conversations, we would inquire as to whether the other had gone to the home or gotten a present. Because we were all terrified that someone was recording us and might use anything we said against us, we had an unspoken agreement that we couldn't voice openly. In 2017, he described an experience that made him think about coming out. I was thinking of going public with what I knew, so I told someone I trusted that. A blogger released an entirely made-up tale about my private life. 3 days after that, the details were crafted to seem convincing, making downplaying them likely to draw further scrutiny. There was no mistaking the message. This was only a taste of the consequences of speaking up. According to Will's testimony, Diddy's network encompassed more than just show business. He was well connected in the media with powerful business people and with those who decided how much money would go into advertising. Their impact extended far beyond the realms of music and film. Rather, it permeated virtually every facet of public life. If you were on the side of the system, he said, problems would magically go away. Legal matters would be settled in an enigmatic fashion, and bad press would never surface in the press. However, rumors, attack pieces, and anonymous sources divulging harmful material might appear out of nowhere if you were on the outs. Your good name may be systematically ruined to the point that you would have no choice but to act when it was too late. According to Will, he saw other people try to get out of this system. Talented people tried to rise up and separate themselves from the situation. Relationships terminated. Friendships melted, and support networks shattered for nearly all of them. This was true both professionally and emotionally. That was intentional seclusion. Will's expression grew increasingly furious. For many years, I kept quiet. I told myself I was defending my loved ones, my job, and all I had worked for. However, charges were subsequently filed. The proof started to come to light, and I understood that keeping quiet wasn't a defense mechanism. It was an admission of guilt. As soon as the initial allegations against Diddy surfaced, he recounted seeing them reported in the press. It wasn't my story to tell, I reminded myself. Others who had gone through worse should have spoken out. But then I witnessed the treatment of individuals who did speak out, the doubting and questioning of their veracity, the media's character assassination of their personalities. Will described the turning point in his life. A witness who had spoken out courageously and provided details that matched what I had observed abruptly recanted their statement while I was at home with my family. According to a news alert, allegedly, it had never occurred, they said. All of a sudden, the meaning of that was instantly clear to me. The system was functioning properly. People were still being silenced by the machine. This is what he told the court that night. He couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about how many lives were ruined, how many careers were halted, and how many people had been injured. I couldn't help but wonder what chance did the rest of us have when someone as powerful, well-off, and publicly supported as me was too chicken to speak out. Will stated that the next morning he made direct contact with the prosecution's team. I spilled the beans about all I knew, had witnessed, and had gone through. I turned over any correspondence, the flash drive I had received, any notes I had kept, or anything else that would support the testimony of others. The jurors were his focus. I'm not trying to make a victim card here. I'm here to admit that I contributed to the situation by remaining silent. It would have been wise of me to speak out a long time ago. Perhaps, if I had, the number of casualties would have been lower. He then turned to Diddy, once again his expression determined this time. And you anticipated that stillness. You were banking on the fact that terror would triumph over conscience. Will seemed to collect his strength for what was to come by briefly closing his eyes before continuing. I mentioned the tapes when the prosecution wanted to know what pushed me over the edge to testify. He clarified that he didn't know which recordings I was referring to. According to Will, a former assistant of Diddy had discreetly approached him. This individual had been bearing the weight of the responsibility for years. They were in charge of the digital collection of potentially damaging materials. I was informed that hundreds of recordings were filed according to individuals' prospective usefulness and severity of harmful information. With a sealed envelope containing evidence, the prosecutor came forward. "Exhibit 53, Your Honor," the bailiff said, and the judge nodded. The paper was then brought to the bench. After seeing the file index, Will knew it was an exact replica. A number of influential figures from the worlds of showbiz, business, and politics were names on that list. The phrases useful, explicit, intoxicated, minor, present, and financial compromise were scribbled next to each name in Will's database of devastation. Will went on to explain how the assistant had presented him with this data. The real tapes were withheld from me because they had been obtained by federal investigators. However, they demonstrated the catalog and organizational structure to me. They even showed me records for my own name in that database along with dates. Extra paperwork was handed out by the prosecutor. "Can you tell the court what this email chain is and why it's important?" Will gave a submissive nod. "This is Diddy's correspondence with several executives regarding how to deal with an actress who had started talking privately about her experience at one of these gatherings." They laid out a three-pronged strategy. First, they would discredit her with unimportant stories that would cast doubt on her credibility. Second, they would use the financial pressures from the projects she was involved with to their advantage. And lastly, they would release clips meant to embarrass her while they protected themselves. His gaze shifted to Diddy. The actress did a dramatic U-turn 3 weeks after sending these emails, claiming she was having memory problems due to mental health difficulties and announcing her departure from the profession. Since then, she has not worked. When Will saw the entire extent of the operation, he went into detail, and a complete power system based on fear and compromise was in charge. Not simply individual careers. It was all planned to put the parties in an unshakable position. The recordings, the strategic use of information, it was all orchestrated. A document was shown on the courtroom screens by the prosecutor. "Excuse me, is this text message exchange identifiable looking at the screen?" Will blinked. "From 2018 onward, that's just between Diddy and me. For the third time, I turned down his invitation to an event. This is already difficult enough. You're just making things worse. I still have our initial meeting to remind you of. I wish your children could never see their father in that light." Despite his palms becoming stiff, Will's voice stayed calm. There has never been a direct threat before. Everything had been structurally suggested up to that point. He was making it clear in that communication that he would utilize the material he possessed if I refused to comply. He described how he dealt with the threat. The communication went unanswered by me. Rather, I started keeping track of everything. My home's security systems were designed to be inaccessible from a distance. For the sake of my family, I set up distinct lines of communication. I made plans for what I believed would happen eventually. That is, that something would be unleashed to hurt me just because I refused to comply. Will recalled speaking with another witness in the case as the deciding factor in his decision to testify at this time, despite the risks involved. Federal investigators had obtained evidence that couldn't be discarded or exploited anymore. They told me that. They warned that the system might crash if too many people spoke up at once, and I knew then that it was time. "I am not here because I'm courageous," he told the jurors, "because other people were courageous first. I am here. I've come this far because at sometimes staying silent was more expensive than speaking up. Just think about the impact on individuals without the same level of protection. If someone like me, who has access to a lot of resources, felt shackled by this system for years." The court gave Will permission to speak directly to Diddy in his closing remarks. He rose from his seat as a witness straightened his back and met his gaze. "From threats and intimidation, you created an empire," he started. "Business, you said. In your words, it was loyalty. I thought it was family. However, the structure you erected confined all those in your vicinity." Even when his lawyer frantically muttered something into his ear, Diddy stayed perfectly still, staring fixedly into Will's eyes. He appeared truly terrified at the trial for the very first time. "At your gatherings, I witnessed what you did to those individuals. What you did to individuals who disobeyed was visible to me. You didn't create success. You manufactured fear. You stated when you felt confident in your position. I heard you." From his jacket, Will took out one item. This flash drive was rather little. "You sent your insurance coverage to me a long time ago. I'm taking it back since it's completely useless now. The truth has already been revealed." Will looked across to the jurors. "You are ignoring the broader context if you believe this is only about improper conduct at private gatherings. This system aims to control people's activities, quiet them, and compromise them. It impacted not only individuals but also the content we consumed, the people who rose to prominence, and those who faded into oblivion." As a last act, he confronted Diddy. "I thought you said bad boy for life, but now it's over." Will went back to his seat on the witness stand, took stock of his notes, and then silently left the courtroom. For the first time in decades, Diddy wasn't in charge of the story, and his normally cool demeanor completely collapsed throughout the trial. His hands quivered as he jotted down notes for his attorneys, and he looked around the room as if trying to find a way out. Instead of looking victorious, Will Smith appeared to have finally laid down a heavy load as he stepped down from the witness stand. As everyone in the courtroom tried to digest what they had heard, silence fell over the chamber. It seems like even the judge was speechless for a second. Tears were brushed away by a few jurors. But suddenly, the music mogul Diddy sat slumped and deflated. The same image he had presented throughout the proceedings, unfaltering confidence. The journalists gathered outside, but Will continued on his way. He remained silent and avoided the media. His security detail formed a barrier around him as he hurried to his waiting car. His countenance betrayed a serious determination. According to reports, Will said, "The truth doesn't need to fear exposure," when a reporter subsequently asked him whether he was afraid of reprisal because of his testimony. Myths are the only ones that do this. According to those in the know, a seismic change occurred outside of the courtroom in the entertainment sector. Secret meetings were convened by studio officials behind sealed doors. Clients who were anxious about their personal ties to Diddy called publicists in a panic. Artists who had worked with him for a long time released carefully written comments denying any involvement in his improper actions. Teams tasked with handling crises put in extra hours. Associations and contracts were examined by legal departments. In preparation for the queries that were sure to come, public relations companies developed responses. However, the most illuminating response emerged from social media, where the general public finally made sense of things that had been obvious for a long time but had been disregarded. Old interviews with Will resurfaced, revealing awkward exchanges and moments when he had clearly tensed up when Diddy was mentioned. Footage from the red carpet showed them interacting in a fake but tense manner. And at music industry events, their paths clearly never crossed, even though they were both there. Experts in the field of media analysis started looking at previous stories with a new perspective. They noticed, for example, that negative stories about celebrities appeared just after they cut ties with Diddy. That promising careers abruptly came to a halt for no apparent reason, and that certain narratives were emphasized while others were downplayed. The judicial system itself had the most noticeable effect right away. The prosecution announced the evidence of 3 more high-profile witnesses within 48 hours following Will's testimony. These witnesses had previously declined to testify due to fear of consequences. Silence was beginning to crumble. The monetary ramifications quickly accumulated. Stock prices of companies associated with Diddy's numerous businesses went up and down as investors became wary. Some of the brands that had been working with him on endorsement arrangements have now said that they are putting their partnerships on hold while they gather more information. His highly regarded playlists were covertly pulled from music streaming services. The meticulous detail of Will's story and the proof he supplied made his testimony more damning, not to mention his celebrity position. This was not emotional hearsay, but rather a documented account of a complex management system that was consistent with patterns stated by other witnesses. As pointed out by one legal analyst, most importantly, it appeared that others were encouraged by Will's testimony. Various levels of the entertainment industry's professional community started coming out about their own experiences not only with Diddy, but with the pervasive culture of silence and complicity that had existed for decades. A larger reckoning was taking shape from what had started as an investigation into a single prominent man. People working in the entertainment sector have been calling support hotlines at an alarming rate, according to mental health experts. What we're witnessing is a communal trauma reaction, stated one therapist who specialized in the topic. A lot of people are now seeing traumatic events or what they really were after having normalized them. After giving his testimony, Will mostly avoided the spotlight. According to many in his inner circle, he prioritized his family and his mental health. The motivation behind this action was not to garner attention or exposure. According to an acquaintance who spoke with the journalist, the reason it was done was because it was essential. Professionals in the field of law started to speculate on what this would mean for the case. It is impossible to disregard the testimony of someone of Will Smith's ilk due to his degree of credibility and the public's faith in him. The clarity of the testimony and its coherence with other evidence makes that tough. According to a former prosecutor, the defense will attempt to characterize it as hearsay or exaggeration. The judge dealt with the consequences of Will's evidence head-on when court met again the next day. The importance of yesterday's proceedings is acknowledged by this court. Our legal system is based on facts and evidence, not sensationalism or celebrity. And I want everyone to remember that. However, we must give careful consideration to every witness who comes up despite the danger they face. The prosecution used Will's testimony as a springboard to more evidence and witnesses. Multiple witnesses have now confirmed from different perspectives that what Mr. Smith described wasn't an isolated incident, but rather a part of a larger pattern structure and manner of operation. There is a reason behind the uniformity. Diddy's legal staff seemed obviously stressed. The characterization of accusers as opportunists or people with personal grudges has been a major tenet of their campaign. When up against someone with Will's fame and fortune, such strategy failed. As they skirted the meat of the testimony in favor of pointing out discrepancies, their attempts at cross-examination seemed futile. The last picture from that part of the trial wasn't of arguments about the law or the process. Instead, it was of two faces that couldn't have been more different. Will Smith, whose expression was one of relief at having spoken his mind, and Diddy, whose expression was one of terror at the destruction of his carefully built world as he watched Smith leave. Will Smith didn't only testify against an individual. He testified against a system that transformed authority into consent apathy, into involvement, and dread into dominance. As stated by a cultural critic in an analysis that gained widespread attention, he may have contributed to the downfall of an empire far larger than himself in doing so.